We're lucky. We're honored to have the head strength and conditioning coach from the Ottawa Senators in the National Hockey League with us. Chris is also the founder of a fitness company known as FitQuest throughout the Ottawa area in Ontario. Chris has also spoken and is a large part of the development movement and model for Hockey Canada. Chris, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you guys been on the road for a week. You're in Western Canada, and we wish you a lot of good luck. Chris has 25 years of experience coaching, rehabilitating elite professional and amateur athletes. I think that's one of the great things. He's not just a strength coach of the Ottawa Senators. He works across the boards. He works with 8-year-olds and he works with elite international level athletes. As mentioned, he's the head strength coach of the Ottawa Senators. It's the same job he held with the New York Islanders, where he, Matt, and I all got a chance to work together. He and Matt actually lived together for a while. Prior to joining the NHL, Chris was held the same job with the Ottawa 67s of the Ontario Hockey League. Additionally, Chris speaks with Hockey Canada. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in kinesiology from the University of Dalhousie, and he's authored several articles on exactly what we're talking about today. As an athlete, Chris won the All-Canadian Men's Volleyball Player of the Year and went on to play professionally in both France and Belgium. Chris, we appreciate you taking your time. We look forward to hearing from somebody who knows a lot more about the subject than I do. And again, thank you so much. Please welcome Chris Schwarz.
Thanks very much, Tony, or Toby. I just got to grab the screen here. Get started. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me this morning. It's 7 a.m. Here in Edmonton, Canada, and I'm in a hotel room in the bubble, just getting ready to go. So today what I'm going to speak upon is just my foundations of athletic development, of what that's going to look like. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you some opinions. Can you hear me?
You're perfect, Chris. You're perfect.
Okay, because it's hard to, yeah. Okay, I'll start over here. Sorry that. Just some opinions on the trends in athletic development. The way that I look at it may be a little different than what you've heard before from a strength coach, is again, Toby spoke about, is I do a lot of development, not only from the performance side, but also from the growth and development side. So I think it's a really important component of making sure we're looking at it from all angles and from the sort of the higher 12,000 foot view. And then just the observation of your athletes. I don't need to go over this. Toby had nicely said nice things about me here. So this is how the foundation of, I put the players up because really as a strength coach, you're learning from the players at the highest level. I think what I've done is looked and see what do these guys have and how do we try to see what, when you're drafting, as Toby said, when we're at the combine, we're looking at physical development, but we're looking at athletes. We want to make sure that we're choosing the athlete first. And then we, as strength coaches, that's what we want to have, is we want to have great athletes step in the door so we can get them stronger, so we can get them faster, so we can make them more resilient. But the thought is, if they're not an athlete, it's pretty tough to do that. And I'll just go through with Erik Karlsson. We draft Erik Karlsson 153 pounds. Everybody's telling me, well, he's going to look great when we put 20 pounds on him, with 20 pounds on him, and put 20 pounds on him. We're running drills in a field, and Erik is winning by 20 meters in a probably 60-meter race. He's blowing everybody out of the door. And I said, okay, well, if we're going to add 20 pounds to him, is he going to still be able to do that? And so over the years, we worked with Erik, gained weight. And if you saw the capacity and the continuum that Toby had showed, we weren't thinking about hypertrophy. Erik was, maybe age wise, he looked a little bit younger. As you can see there, he looks like he's about 14 years old. But once he got, as we moved him along, he was very strong, very powerful. He was jumping on one leg. He was jumping 2 meters 85 on one leg as a 18-year-old at 153 pounds. We don't want to lose that. We want to keep that. And as you can see, as he went along, there's some things that he needed to work through. But obviously, as we all know, Eric's won 2 Norris trophies. Looking at Mark Stone, as you know, he's the captain of the Vegas Hockey Club right now. And if you look at what Mark really does well, and what I observe with Mark is Mark makes decisions very quickly, and he maximizes it. So if you look at the reaction time, when somebody says to me, this person needs to get faster, we worked with Mark, not only off the ice, working on sprinting, dynamic, impulsive movements, but also recognizing that his gift is his decision-making. So how do we shorten that decision-making? Can we take that decision and can we shorten that so that the relatency phase, which is the second phase, it shortens that reaction time, and then there's a response. So I think that's really important when looking at an athlete, is you need to look at the athlete as the whole. Not all of them are going to be dynamic, but what Mark's gift is decision making, and we really I wanted to look at that, and we worked on that a lot over the years, and still continue to do that. This is a good friend of mine, Dave Smart, and looking at athletes from that big global view and that developmental view. One thing Dave told me is that, athletes have success when they own their own confidence. So if they don't feel comfortable about what they're doing, if you tell them they're bad and they actually think they're good, that's an athlete that owns their own confidence. If they were good, if they were bad, they can tell you that they were bad. But an athlete owning his own confidence is incredibly important. And we are, as coaches, are supposed to be doing that. When I see an athlete that scores, it has a hat trick after a game, even, at the professional level, I'll walk up to him and say, I don't know what you did today, but let's do it again. We're trying to drive that confidence. An athlete that is confident in their athleticism, is confident in themselves, no matter what is thrown at them. These slides are going to look a little funny, but going back to a discussion that I had when I was playing volleyball in France, and it was a real eye-opener, that I was working with a guy by the name of Wojciech Fabianczyk. He was a Polish coach that I was playing with in France, and I had to do this thing where I would slide down, back set the ball, but I had to do a cartwheel before I did that. And to know the position I played, I was a right side hitter. All I would do is hit balls, but he wanted me to do this 10 times perfectly. And I said to him, why are we doing this? And this is what he responded to me: because you can't do it. The moment you can do something that you can't do, in my mind, you're expanding your athletic spectrum. So when an athlete comes to you and says, Coach, why are we doing this? And sometimes it doesn't make sense to them. I tell them it's because you can't do it. Performing activities you cannot do currently, you increase your overall athleticism. I really strongly believe that. I think too many times we're doing things where we're not expanding, we're keeping the same drill. It looks easy. Even for the professionals, as soon as I start doing something that looks easy, and I want them to challenge themselves to make it harder. About 4 years ago, I put out an article in Ottawa, and it was sort of people were wondering why we put this out, and we were having athletes come into our setting that we would give them a football, and they would throw the football, and once they would throw that football, they could barely catch. They couldn't catch it, or they couldn't throw the ball properly, and it was a real eye opener to a lot of coaches when they looked inward and saw their athletes, and it went all across Europe and across Canada, and people saying, yes, we're seeing athletes now that they're just not athletes anymore. We just assumed before that we had these great athletes come in and the kids could do everything, and then we would just give them hockey skills and they would get great. but their athleticism was declining significantly, and it was really concerning. So that if you want to take a peek at that article, we can maybe get that article sent out also. I think the other part of my philosophy is using a balance of evidence and experience-based coaching. I think at times I'm thinking like a scientist. I think at times I'm thinking like a coach. And I think at times I'm also thinking like an athlete. And I think that's one thing that we forget is that athletes do not love to train. At the elite level, they like to train. They love to play their sport. So when we're trying to look through data and we're talking, we're coaching, keep that in mind that, you know, the athlete is doing this so that they can succeed in their sport and in the position that I work in. So, and I have to always keep that in the mindset of, it's not about me and what Toby said. The job is about developing people and supporting them and getting them so that they can succeed in their sport. I think there's an overuse of technology these days and an underuse of coaching with feel. I know there's been a lot of articles. I think people are coming in and diving into data again. And what I just said is the athletes like technology. They don't love it. They want to know what they can do. We utilize a lot of technology, but some of that information I give and some I don't. But I really, really strongly believe that coaching is what causes success with athletes. And then just to keep the message clear, I love to coach explosive, dynamic, maximal effort movements. I love to coach resiliency in a performance setting. I have a few gyms. I trained a lot myself. I just like to perform on athletes that are athletic. Like I said before, if an athlete comes in at 16 years old and he's super athletic and he's lean and all we have to do is get him stronger, put a little bit of weight on him, support him with the skills coach, that's the easiest thing in the world. It's so easy to do that. But when an athlete comes in at 16, they're slow, they're not dynamic. It's very, very difficult to reverse that at that point and just try to throw strength on it. All that's going to do is get somebody that's stronger, a bit heavier, but is not athletic. And that's not what's going to make the best athlete in the long term. Striving for the top 20%. Something that I think happens a lot of time. I gave a talk with Hockey Canada, and it had a picture of an athlete being pushed down. I think we push a lot of athletes down into that bottom 80%, meaning that we don't challenge the top 20% enough. And we really want to be conscious of that. So the athletes that have the tools and the abilities to excel, as Toby said, at 20 years old, are maybe not the ones that are going to be there at 16, but they have the ability to do that. Don't push them down. Don't label them. Labeling goes a long way in our sport of hockey. Does that athlete look like a hockey player? Do they act like a hockey player? They're not always going to, as Toby said, they're not always going to go through at the same age. I've seen it in so many years. I've seen guys come in at 27 and 28. We just had a player by the name of Nick Paul that made our team that's really striving this year. And it took a few years for him to sort of figure out his body, figure out the way he needed to be a professional. Going through the slide that Toby had put in is something similar. I just wanted to really press upon the point that it's critical at this point that we do not take athleticism out. We've done some work with female athletes as well as males and seen a decline in sprint times at the age of 13 compared to 14. And we're wondering why that's happening. A lot of times athletes are that's when they're switching over to the sport and trying to just be a hockey player. And that's great, but we need to make sure that they're also being athletes in the critical time to stay athletic. I don't think we subtract from that. I think if anything, it's adding it in. And I know it's tough as coaches. I often get coaches say, well, they can't play this and that and do it 12 months a year. They shouldn't be. I have a 14-year-old athlete. He's very dynamic, very good athlete, but I do not let him play sports. And he would love to just be a baseball player right now, but he's going to continue to play basketball all the way through until the point that we feel that he needs to make that change. But please do not pull athleticism out at that age. It's very critical that we continue to play sports, do other things, be creative. Feats of athleticism. As most of us on this call would look at these pictures and be amazed at the athleticism that these athletes have. This isn't very cool to young athletes anymore. Not many of them will look at this, and we would look at some of this stuff and see a video or something on television, talk about it for hours. These athletes these days will look at this and just sort of pass it over. So I think this is something that I try to show a lot of my athletes of how difficult that is to do. How hard is it for Roger Federer to take that ball between his legs when the ball's coming at 100 miles an hour off of the court, picks it up through his legs. JJ Watt, the top left, is an NFL football player in the United States. That guy is 100, probably 150 kilos, and he's jumping up in the air like that. Donovan Bailey, I had to put a Canadian athlete in there beating an American athlete. Sorry, guys. That when he won the gold medal, the player that's down on the athlete's down on the bottom, that's not a superimposed video. That player touches in feet, he touches over 12 and a half feet. So his navel, his belly is actually at the net, and that's a true picture. So, we look at that, and can we make that exciting for athletes again? Can we make it that this is what they do? The professional athletes, they love to look at this. They love seeing athleticism. That's what they want to do. They want to be an athlete. I think, take this a couple different ways. I think a lot of the things, as I talked before, I really want to make sure that athletes have time to be allowed to be creative. I don't do this with anything. I obviously work in a professional setting. I don't go to my head coach and say, I think that they should do different drills. And that's not what my job is. But my job is to make sure that creativity isn't stifled, because that's what makes the best. Can they be creative? Allow them to make the creative choice and not just the safe choice. If you look at sometimes in female hockey, we've looked at it before, and I've talked to a couple coaches, and they said they make that safe choice. And is that because you allowed them to make that safe choice, or did they actually have to make a choice that was creative? I mean, I talked to a number of athletes that make mistakes, and they said, well, I made that choice. It might have not have been the safe one, but it was the one where we could score. It was the one where we could win. And I had to make that choice. So let's make sure that we're keeping the creativity with our athletes. As long as, again, it doesn't affect your systems. And when it does, let's praise them. Let's clap and say, hey, great job. Or creative. If I'm doing a drill and somebody changes it a little bit to be more creative, I like that. I allow it. I think it's tough these days to be athletic. Just because of gym classes, less creative, more restrictive. I don't know what it's like in Latvia, but I know, and across the world, we're having issues with gym and physical education that aren't mandatory. In Canada, we've actually, some places have taken balls. They're not allowed to play with balls at recess in school because of concussion issues, etc. So we're dealing with that. And then again, adding classes to teach weightlifting in place of gymnastics, track and field, etc., is forcing that top 20 down into that bottom 80. And it concerns me. It's something that I've been speaking about, and I'm going to continue to speak about across North America. So when we look at the components of elite hockey performance, as I see, for today's purposes, we're going to talk about athleticism, but there's so many more things that when I'm looking at an athlete, that I'll look at their skate speed. How many times have you been told, you tell an athlete, you need to skate faster? Well, there's so many components of that. We'll look into that a little bit. There's so many components to skating mobility. There's so many components to specific energy systems, to battle strength, to specific skill, to an athlete that's injured all the time, injury prevention, to hockey IQ. Do they have the hockey IQ that I need? Internal drive. Do they have that internal drive? And obviously health, which incorporates nutrition, etc. So you can see that's a complete development of an athlete. It's not just looking at through one lens. For purposes of today's presentation, I'm going to be speaking on athleticism. So at the 10 to 12, I have 10 to 12, 12 to 14. The biggest component when we're talking with my coaches or any athlete, and I believe that athleticism should be the basis of that. So when we're creating programming, we're creating athletic programming, keeping in mind the kids are having a fun time while they're training. So they might do something athletic, we're catching, throwing balls, doing something, and then they're going off and they're doing something that's performance related, strength exercise, whatever that may be, to keep them engaged, but also you're getting what you want and they're getting what they want. Speed and impulse. The kids at young ages need to ensure they're fast. The game is fast. We've talked about the evolution of the game. The game is only getting faster. If you are not fast, it's very, very, very difficult to play at the highest level. And we need to teach that. They can't pick that back up at 17 or 18 and get faster. Speed and impulse. Impulse meaning that quick explosiveness, that this way, that way. They got to go right to the puck. They need to start off quickly. And observing the athlete is what's the most important thing, is to watch the athlete move. Do they move with impulse? Strength and stability obviously is important, but not, we're looking at more stability issues. Can they hold and hold on an edge, or can they jump and hold? Again, all these things, if you drill down deeper into them, there's a lot more into that. General conditioning and then general nutrition. As we go through U15 to U16, if you look at the different goals, we start to, again, athleticism is very much a part of what we need to do. Speed and impulse. Strength and stability starts to increase. We start to progress those exercises. Again, the exercises at 15 and 16, just like math and school, will not be like it was for a 20-year-old. It's for a 15 or 16-year-old. It's for that age appropriate athlete. Conditioning, power, and then general nutrition. Now we start to get where the athlete, we can start to add things in to develop that whole model of athleticism, speed and impulse, specific conditioning, stability. We add some strength work. This is where we start to look at specific power, body composition. We don't do much body composition. And what I mean by body composition is that we're not taking too much of body fat. We're making sure that that's not too much of a body image thing when they're at that age, both females and males. And as we get forward, we start looking at more specific health nutrition, and then we add the mental performance. So if you look at the two models, model on the left shows that athleticism, again, is the basis of it. Right now, what's happening, and it also happens in Canada and US, is that the skill acquisition is so high. Parents want to have, they want to have the skills coach come in and teach them, let's do this, let's do that. And I get it. There's businesses out there that need to survive on that. I'm not saying that, but the skill acquisition cannot be the basis of a young athlete's triangle or pyramid. It needs to be athleticism. Pile that skill acquisition on top. Now I got an athletic athlete that's skilled. And then somebody like me comes in and says, okay, how do we refine this? And how do we put all this together, working with the skills coach to get them stronger, to get them faster, to get them more stable, resilient, less injured? How do we do that? The model on the right will only fail because the athleticism will never let them get to a higher point. If you even look at athleticism from a basis of injury prevention, how many times have you seen an athlete lately, and you guys can probably think this, they're coming down, somebody gets hit and they fall and they flip over onto their back and hit their head. When we were younger, we would not do that. We would fall, we would roll, and we would make sure we got out of that because we're athletic. We don't smash our heads on it. We don't bump into each other because we avoid each other. So some of the athletic aspects of athleticism could also help with injury prevention as we go forward. So what is athleticism? You can call this athleticism. You can say it's movement based. So cognitively, we want to have the ability to process the information. Can I take the information in? And then once it comes in, can I interpret that information? From there, I have to control my body. And from there, I'm going to make a skilled movement. I'm going to think, I'm going to interpret, and I'm going to move. And so when you look at your athletes, try to figure out, can they actually process the information that you're giving them, or then that they can see? Can they interpret it? And then do they move with control? Very, very important. Um, have you ever evaluated these with your young athletes? So if you looked at different components, can they run? Can they sprint? Do they have mechanics to be able to run properly? Can they jump? Can they catch? Can they throw? Can they throw? Can they throw with both hands? Can they kick? Kick with both feet, not just one side and dominant. Can they move in multiple directions? Do they have the ability to do gymnastics? Can they do cartwheels? Can they do somersaults? Can they do things that allow their body to be aware? Can they process? Is this an athlete that actually can process the environment that they're in? And then do they have that body awareness? And I think if you drill down into these, there's a lot to do them, but have you ever evaluated your athletes? We did this with Hockey Canada, where we had athletes come in and we hit tennis balls up in the air. They had to catch one with their right hand and come a little bit closer and catch one with their left hand. Majority of the balls were bouncing off their heads, going over their heads. Their depth perception wasn't there. These are all things they can't later on learn how to do those at 17 or 18. So evaluating those with your athletes, I think, is really important. It also gives you a basis of what some of the things you can have them do. How are you going to change their curriculum of their training, and what is that going to look like? And then next, I guess, would be is the parents themselves need to understand that. When we had parents view this, the parents could not believe that their kids could not do a somersault, could not roll into a position, couldn't catch with both hands, couldn't throw with both hands. It's incredible to watch an athlete that can't do this when you think that they can. So try this. You can be creative, and if anybody needs any help with this, I'd be happy to give you some ideas. But creating these athletic challenges is a great way to see what athlete you have. And again, if we do not do this, and Toby said it earlier, if we do not do things when they're young, the worst thing in the world is to see an athlete that you think is going to get somewhere and you wonder why they didn't get there. And it's because we just pushed their athletic ceiling down and didn't allow to do that. They're strong. They're super skilled, but they just don't have the athletic spectrum to play at the highest level. The best athletes in the world have pushed this spectrum to a high enough level so that they can skill acquisition, go back to that pyramid. These are the athletes that we want, the ones that increase their athletic spectrum at a young age. I always say this in my talks, is that sport's not a dance rehearsal. We can't paint by numbers or say, go here, go there. When somebody comes at me and I'm a defenseman, I'm not going to say to them, please go this way or please go this way. You have to make a decision based on what they give you. So the best athletes, superior athletes, understand how to respond when there are many options available. And that's really, really important here, is that we can't create, sport is not a dance rehearsal. You have to be able to think and process and move. The best athletes in the world in hockey can come around the net as a defenseman and make choice A, B, and C. If they've if they've always had to say, make the one decision, they're never going to be able to read and react and make all those decisions. On and off the ice, we need to help them with that by putting curriculum, skills, and understanding what their limitations are. One of the things that I really like to look at, so if you look at the chart down on the bottom right, this is adapted by Malstiff. And if you look at speed, how many times have I heard before coaches, we need to get them faster? There's so many components to getting somebody faster. Look at the different components of speed: muscle endurance, internal conditions, motor coordination. If you go around the rim, there's all kinds of things that we can do to make somebody faster. But the one thing that you can do is adding, cueing, and reacting. Are you just doing something and saying go A, B, or are you saying go A, B, C? If the person is moving, can you say white or red and they have to go to those cones? Can you use technology? There's lots of good technology out there that can help an athlete move and create different scenarios. I think that's really, really important when we look at using a reactive agility. the picture and the poor picture on the left is Rocky chasing a chicken in the movie Rocky, and it's the ability to be able to chase chickens and dodge ball and those types of things. And we want athletes that can chase chickens. We want athletes that can move and be agile. I wrote an article, helped write an article, why big kids often get bad coaching in youth sports. And what that's saying is that big athletes should not just be in positions of doing sports and being big. So the big defenseman that can just angle people and be slow and kind of use his size, later on, he's going to be in trouble. So we want to keep them moving. We want to keep them moving with rhythm. Do they have rhythm? Can they move with rhythm? Or are they robotic when they do things? Observe that with your big athletes. Don't let them be small. I wanted to put a picture up actually of Mark Mathot. If you look at Mark Mathot, Victor Hedman, big athletes that can move really well on the ice. They move like somebody that is small. I had a pleasure of working with Mark when he was younger, and we'd always put him up against athletes that were smaller, even though he was bigger. So don't let them fall back in the line and work with the bigger athletes that are slower. Force them to go with the bigger athletes. Keep them moving with rhythm. Keep them lean and mobile. It's very, very difficult later on when an athlete's 16, 17 years old and they haven't been asked to be lean. They've been bigger than everybody else, so they use their size. That's great, but we need to keep them lean and mobile so that later on we start through those stages that Toby had talked about physical development, of getting stronger, adding proper lean muscle mass to a mobile body. It's the greatest thing in the world. And keep them moving, again, as I said, in all positions on and off the ice. Please, please, please don't label them into being big. And then keep them competing speed agility with smaller athletes. So one of the things that I see in athletes is that it's very difficult for them to have the body awareness performing at different speeds. If you see the sport now, the best athletes, the James Hardens of the world in basketball, we were lucky enough to have Daniel Alfredson with us. Daniel's greatest skill was to be able to take the puck and move east and west, but also change speeds. Athletes these days do not understand what changing gears is. Most of them either really dynamic or they're really slow, but they don't understand sometimes those middle gears. And it's something, again, if you're looking in the observation of your athletes, take a peek and make sure that you see whether or not they can do those middle gears. So I'm saying, for example, if you take an athlete and you had them throw a ball and they threw the ball at 55 kilometers per hour, and they could throw it at 55, can the athlete stop and throw at 40 kilometers an hour? Some of them can, some of them can't, but it's really interesting to see if they know their body awareness. They can throw it at 30, they can throw it at 55, but they don't understand the body and will allow them to throw at 40. Or run a time sprint at 65% of their max speed over this distance. They don't know what that 65, you have to give them a number and say, can you run a 30-meter sprint at this time? Only this time, not your fastest speed, not your slowest speed, maybe 65%. You can move these up and down. Try that with your athletes. They'll have a very hard time at understanding and putting their body into that position. One of the things when you look through athletes again is just their ability to relax. You know, when you look at the athlete himself, if you look at Usain Bolt in the top left, Usain's running an incredibly quick speed, relaxed, and is able to look over shoulder. Most athletes can't do that. They're very tight, and that's why we need to understand that a component of speed is the ability to relax. Steph Curry on the bottom, 1,000 miles an hour, takes the ball, stops, and then relaxes and releases that shot. And then if you look at Connor McDavid, who we had the pleasure of playing with against last night, that just the way that he moves and you watch him from a higher view or any angle, and you see how fast he is, but how relaxed he is at the same time. It's really important. So many athletes that are trying to go faster and they don't have that ability to relax. So identify that and observe that with your athletes. The ability to have muscle coordination. So can an athlete skip? Can they A-march? Can they box with rhythm and not being robotic? Can they move? These are things that when I bring an athlete in, sometimes we'll just as a workout, we'll have them doing a muscle coordination workout just to see if they can do it. Most kids can't skip. They have no coordination. They have no rhythm. So again, you're taking an athlete, you're making them stronger, you're making them fitter, but they don't have the ability, the synergy, and the rhythm that you need in order to be a good athlete and move with speed. This was something that we did the other day. I was lucky enough to have Coach Smith ask me to do something for a day. And in the hotel, we set up, and the top left, you can see was soccer tennis. So we had 2 athletes on each side. They had 3 minutes at each event. We had 6 events going on. And again, we're using this as a part of more of a recovery day where we didn't want to be on the ice. We thought that getting the guys together would be a great idea. So we had soccer tennis, we had ping pong up on the right-hand side. We did a form of a bocce ball, as you can see on the bottom left. And then we did a pickleball, which was in the bottom right. And this again was a great opportunity for coaches to view their athletes. The 2 athletes that we put together that you would not have thought would have won ended up winning because of a lot of other things, because of competitiveness, resiliency. That's a really good setting to observe your athletes outside of the setting that you see them in, which is generally hockey. So you put these challenges together. We do them very often. Sometimes we do them before workouts, and sometimes we'll do them as part of our recovery days. This was just a quick video of something that the players had actually put together. They just started pitching to each other. And here's the video, I'll run it. This was actually the first pitch, and our video guy was down on one knee, takes the ball, and knocks the ball out of his hand. But those are games that players pick up on them by themselves. They're the ones that set these up. This is a warm-up that Freddie Clayson a few years ago would do before he went on the ice, just to get a feel, to be an athlete, to move, to process. Left and right. Colin White on the bottom. Catch and throw. Catch and throw. Turning, a little bit of body awareness, a little bit of eye processing. How many times have you seen your athletes that just can't pick anything up? Do they do anything with balls? They warm their bodies up. And this is a whole other talk, but just how do you get your athletes to be ready for the first period? If they haven't seen or visually or processed, it's probably something that you want to add to their routines. Losing in a game they're not good at. You know, you're going to get so many of their athletes that are not going to want to play. Are they good at badminton, right? Can they play other sports? They're not going to want to play it as an elite athlete, but they need to. So our 16-year-old elite athletes are rarely have failures because of the big fish in the small pond. They never lose. And then all of a sudden they have some hardships when they're 17 or 18. They don't make teams. And they can't deal with failures because they've always won. Playing sports and going get beaten basketball or getting beat really badly at badminton has so much value for athletes as they get older in their development. No competitiveness in anything else because they can't compete in anything else. And finally, just to wrap up here, just some great books with resources. The ability to critically think under pressure. Has a broad range of experiences. This book's written by David Epstein. I don't know if anybody's written it or read it or not. It's a fantastic book, sort of demythifies the whole 10,000 hour rule, which I'm not a complete supporter of. I think that there's way more out there of having a broad range of skills. Again, and if I say this and pull into the world of athleticism, the more I can do, we talk about that spectrum, the greater range I have, the more, the better athlete I believe we're going to be. The Performance Cortex by Zach. Just looking at athletic genius, these athletes are seeing targets that we can't see. Some of the most elite athletes, the things that they say to us in video sessions, and you just make sure they know what's happening before it's going to happen. And this is kind of some of the science of why skilled athletes are skilled athletes. The Playmaker's Advantage, which is done by Len. I think it's a great book looking at how playmakers think and react and the mental component. And it's really backed by some solid science. And just in closing, let's be athletic mentors with our athletes. Take time to evaluate your athletes' athleticism. Do athletes, coaches, and parents understand the importance of athleticism and areas that they need to improve? Do what they can't do and always what they can do, right? We can't do that. We have to do things that they can't do. Keep adding things that they can't do to make sure that we push that athletic spectrum. And lastly, are you doing everything you can to keep the top 20 percenters in the top 20%? Athletes first. Are your athletes developing or losing ground? Over time, athletes are either improving, as we are in anything in life. We're either getting a 1% improvement or a 1% decline. We're not asking for a 10 to 15% improvement in a year. That 1% improvement over time will give you those marginal gains. And those are the athletes that we want. That's all I got.
Chris, thank you very much. Phenomenal. Phenomenal job. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for bringing your knowledge at all levels. I find it interesting that so many of the speakers so far, whether it be education and Chris, whether it be things that I've talked about, obviously what Chris Schwarz is talking about here, that there's a correlation on how all this works. Just so everyone knows, we're going to have a Q&A, as Justus mentioned earlier. We'll call it overtime, have a beer and talk some hockey. But Chris is in Edmonton with the team now, so he has a time constraint. So we have about 15 to 20 minutes of question and answers for Chris now. Please feel free to ask. We'll go by hands. There's a little hand function down in the lower right-hand side of your screen. Kind of go back to school. But there were a couple that were sent in while Chris was talking. One that we had was, if you could change one thing in young athlete development, what would that be, Chris?
Speed development. Speed development for sure. I mean, I think it's the impulsiveness of, we think of speed of how fast somebody can run over 10 meters or 20 meters, the impulsiveness of that, watching somebody move very quickly. If I go back to Eric Carlson, I always bring athletes in and I say, watch Eric. If we're training in the summertime, if you see, he never moves backwards to go forward. He's always doing things. It's like a frog that goes up and catches a fly. Their tongue doesn't go this way and then this way. And impulsiveness of speed that we're losing it in tag and games. Kids are not quick enough. And if you don't teach that at a young age, it's really, really tough to teach it later on. So I think just watching, again, of just observing your athletes and making sure you're not letting that go. Sometimes as coaches, we say, oh, we'll let it go. We let it go. And I'm not saying, I'm not a big believer in giving too much information to athletes, but one thing they need to learn is how to go quick. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be the quickest athlete, be their quickest selves. I think that's something that's really, really important at a young age.
Awesome. Thank you. Another one that came in, is running still as important as it used to be? In Europe, there's a lot of folks in hockey still run players. It's a part of the training. One, is there a better way to do it? And two, what might be an alternative for running?
I think running is great. I think, but if you look at it, running a diesel engine, so running athletes at a medium-based training is great. The game is played up here. The game is played with speed and accuracy. So if you're going to do the running component, I would prefer more short distance interval-based running, where the person is running, recovering, running and recovering, But again, the benefit of running in hockey is that the stride causes the body to do a lot of this, pushing you out side to side. Running allows the body to move normally. Very rarely do we have, in the world of just the orthopedic world of hockey, we're having a lot of athletes that have issues with hips. And a lot of the times it's because the skating stride. You don't see somebody run through a field and they run with their legs out going to the side and you go, oh, it looks really normal. So running is a normal movement of the body. I think, again, how much running, we know with some hockey players that have ran that they're having issues with ankles and knees and those types of things. But alternatives to that, you know, are you doing enough pool work? Are you doing, I think the variation of that too, you know, the older athletes, we didn't see hip injuries. And because they were doing conditioning by doing swimming, by by playing tennis, by moving in different directions. So the stresses were a lot different. So I think if you ask me about conditioning, I would say try to give a round enough point, especially as a young athlete, so that we don't come into those orthopedic injuries of hip, back, etc. later on in life that we never saw. We never saw that until 15 years ago. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, yeah, great answer. Another question that came in, and a little bit for me, but also for you. In today's world where kids are doing a lot, if a kid, like, if we believe that athletes' health, skill, compete, all come together, in today's world of time management, if players say play sports, excuse me, then they have to figure in practices and they have to figure in games all at one time. They could be playing 4 games in a week. Is that a problem? And I can allude to that a little bit. Is there a way to build in athleticism into our practices as far as just the hockey people? We can control hockey, obviously, in the time we get there. And I think your small games kind of hit some of that. So want to talk to about that a little bit. And the fact that today a lot of kids don't have unstructured sports. So I have a little bit of that, but if you could run with that a little, Chris.
Yeah, no, I mean, that just totally goes into what we were talking about, the little mini games of I actually make up games just based on the arena that we go into sometimes. So we'll have a baseball bats. I think you're only going to get these small, you might only get 5 or 10 minutes of something doing a mini game or a different sport. But if you put these together over time, if you could have 2 or 3 of them a week, all of a sudden they've done 30 or 35 minutes of something. It does not, and I totally get the time, because I'm very conscious of having tired athletes come into the gym is not a great thing. You know, we're trying to get athletes faster. They're doing so much these days that when they come in, it's hard to train. But I think the implementation of the mini games, I think just getting them to understand that 5 or 10 minutes of what we used to do as kids, to throw a ball off the roof and it would come down and bounce and you catch it, and just being creative like that. That's what the definition of athleticism is probably going to be at for athletes that are really time conscious. I think there's too many games probably being played these days, but that's on the hockey side. I'm just on the science and the development side. But yeah, I think the implementation of those mini games. Maybe you can talk a little further on that, Toby.
Yeah, for sure. And then just the second part of that, Chris, is where kids have less unstructured sports now. We call them helicopter parents, where the kids can't do this, can't do that unless, you know, we're watching them and all. When my mother said, go ride your bike and come home at dark, you know. But with the unstructured sports, maybe taken away from the Ottawa Senators, but in FitQuest, are the things you guys do there to allow the kids to play while you're training them, especially the younger ones?
Yeah. So the implementation of spike ball will be actually a spike ball. I don't know if anybody knows that. You smash it on the net and the ball goes up. It's like a game of volleyball type thing. We implement that into our training because, one, again, as I said in the talk, the kids want to be athletic, and they don't see that you're actually getting them moving in different directions and doing some of the things that they're not going to get because it's not structured. But sometimes we'll also throw out balls and have them make up their own games, because again, if we just keep creating structure for them, we're creating this dance rehearsal that they don't have to be creative. So Implementing into training is younger. It keeps the kids engaged. It allows them to be athletic, and don't worry about losing that 10 minutes or 15 minutes to them moving. You just wanted them to be dynamic and process and do it. The end game is that they go on the ice and that they're better, not that they step into a gym and they become a superior gym athlete. That's great. There's lots of people that want to do that. Do that later on in life. We want to implement and develop great athletes.
Yeah, and then on our end of things, we try and break the sports into seasons, and hockey over here has kind of become, it's a summer sport, but in summer they're training and doing other things. There's less emphasis on game and competition over here, and they may be, they may be sailing, they may be mountain biking, they may be playing soccer. A lot of kids play baseball over here in the summertime, so they still do hockey, but it's not a full-time commitment. Right. Hockey over here has kind of become a fall, winter into early spring sport, with a lot of kids then breaking to play lacrosse, football, soccer, as we call it, baseball, etc. So they're doing other things and they're breaking them down in seasons. So they're not playing 4 sports at the same time. And in fact, some leagues over here prohibit that from happening. At the secondary school level, at the high school level. So we want it to happen, but not at the same time. Do some kids do, volleyball in the fall while still playing for the club hockey team? Yeah, 100%. But if you get into 2 competitive sports and then 2 recreational sports that you kind of do on the side, you're achieving the same thing. The other thing we like to do, and you saw it even with Chris, but especially with our players and young players, we bring sports onto the ice. We bring soccer onto the ice. I play football with kids, play 2-on-2, 3-on-3 football, American football, where the kids are using their edges, trying to catch and things like that. We play with balls all the time. We'll juggle. Funny short story, over a few years ago, we were doing a program in Shanghai, China. And again, trying to look at athleticism, because over there they try and focus on one thing, whether it be academics, hockey, sports. We were, my son Chad, I believe he's on the call today. He's one of our fitness coordinators as well. He's based in Idaho, and he's big into developing the athlete as well. But we were throwing tennis balls to the players, 10, 12-year-olds, and a lot of them were hitting them in the head. They couldn't catch a tennis ball from 5 feet away. They need to learn how to do that and to become athletes, to become better players, to give everybody the end result that they're looking for. Another question that came in, Chris, talk about 15 to 17-year-olds and what can you do to increase speed, build speed through off-ice training, and then even probably on ice. Like we do a lot of stuff that we've learned from our strength coaches, and we try and incorporate that onto our skill development programs on the ice. But just in general, for that kid who's 15 to 17, 15 to 18, what are some great things to do for them?
Well, first thing is to identify, if you go back to those slides, take that speed slide with Mel Stiff and identify what part of speed do you want to address? Do you want to address muscle coordination? Do you want to address impulse? Is it the reactive agility? Like, what is it of speed? Because everybody, inevitably as coaches, you guys come to us and say, this person cannot win a battle. This person is not fast enough. The identification of that is incredibly important, again, to say what component of speed that is. So I think if you go back and you try to take that and say, okay, this person just is not impulsive enough. They don't have that ability to snap. So every time, every rep they do will be impulsive. When they jump up on a box, it won't be that they jump down and then jump up. They just jump up quickly. Sometimes we need to observe the way that we do speed on the ice. Same type of stuff. Over speed, does an athlete actually know how to download it quicker? Do they know how to go faster? I was lucky enough to be a jumping athlete, and I didn't need to have a big knee bend. So the other thing about getting faster on the ice is to observe the angle at which an athlete skates sometimes, to be able to push them out of that specific angle. Are they low? Are they higher? Where did they skate? So that the transference of where you want them to be, sometimes it's just about teaching the skating angle. from a skating point of view, and sometimes it's off the ice. So I think if you go back to that slide, and if we brought that slide up and just said, okay, what are the components of speed? And I identified each one of these with this athlete. They're not rhythmic enough. They have no rhythm. Best athletes move with rhythm. The best boxers will move with rhythm and pushing and punching. They're not, right? Does this athlete have the ability to relax? Some of them have everything else, but they don't know how to relax. Therefore, they don't go quickly. They don't move quickly. So the roundabout answer, Toby, is that there's so many things. It's more about observing what they don't have and try to implement that instead of, if we took those things and we added buckets. I find one thing that people do all the time is keep pouring water in the same bucket. This person's not fast enough. Sprint, 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 sprint. And then they have to change directions and there's no water in that bucket. Fill water into that bucket so that the buckets are filling and not overflowing on one side. It happens all the time in strength and conditioning. Okay. Strength is a component, but it doesn't mean that more water in that bucket is going to make them faster when this bucket's empty. Hopefully that answered the question.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic, Chris. What are things that people can do if they lack maybe some resources, maybe they lack some facilities, potentially a smaller organization, but they really want to do good things for their kids? What are some things that they can do without the fancy facilities?
Well, the thing about the fancy facilities is again, if an athlete can't jump and stabilize on one foot, you do not need to all of a sudden get into strength work to try to start with the basis of movement. It costs nothing to have a bunch of athletes standing, doing side to side jump holds, bands, things that are inexpensive. There's tons of time, and just get creative with it. I think in the world now of this pandemic, we've seen so many athletes have to train in their own homes that don't have equipment. People are training in hotels. We've got athletes that when they had the quarantine, some of them were allowed to be in a hotel. So we had to get them some small amounts of equipment, and we really gave them a lot of different things they can do to give them some variety of the training. But there's so many different resources online. I'd be happy to direct people in the right direction if need be.
Yeah. And we can do all of that too, guys, afterwards, and use the different people here if it goes through the federation through Yanni Stropa. We can distribute some information back out to folks. Two questions here, Chris. And one I'll lead with, because we work real closely with a couple of the coaches here in the New England area that have worked with the Bruins and all, and they've said a lot of the new training have gone away from traditional methods, say of the traditional squat, and they still get that power, they still get that dynamic in different ways. But what are your feelings on some of the old exercises versus the new? And then the second part of that is, what's the weight on the bar for speed training squats? Do that.
So just go to the speed of the bar. Anything you look at, if you want to learn a lot about speed, look at Charlie Francis. He's a Canadian scientist that worked with Ben Johnson back in the day. And Charlie's thought was that anytime the rate of contraction is 20% slower than what you could do, then the bar is too heavy. So the bar would be too heavy. So if I was running and I can run a 10-second 100-meter, the minute I'm running 12 seconds, I'm not working on speed. So that's kind of a very simplified way to think about that. I like to be honest with you, with my goaltenders, I'm completely different than what everybody else is. I think goaltending, with the way that the game is now and going into the butterfly back and forth and the strain on the hips, I like to, what I would say telephone booth training is, I like to sometimes just keep them in the telephone booth. I will not put stress on the hips. I will do conventional type training with them because I know that's what they're getting. So if you're getting the movement and you're out, you're playing tennis and you're doing all those things, then maybe that's where the conventional training can be a little bit more. So I like a little bit of that. I definitely like to identify single leg strength on both sides and imbalances. I think part of training nowadays, even as coaching, you should be observing and always assessing. So the functional assessments of bringing somebody in and doing an overhead squat and all that, that can actually be done in your training. So the roundabout of it is, I think that the old school training, there is value to that people didn't get hurt. Some of the new things that we're doing, I think we're getting a little bit too funky in the way that we do it, and we're just trying to make it look good. And you guys can see that on the ice when people have people skating around with balls on their heads. And so I'm a believer in trying to mesh the two, but making sure there's purpose and intent to every training session. So if my intent is to put less stress on this goalie because I know he's up and down 3 or 4 times a week with their goalie coach, why would I bring them in and repeat that motion with resistance in a gym setting? I just don't do that. So if you look at what are they getting, and then do I add conventional, or are they not moving in multiple directions, and I need to get functional and do a little bit more in the gym setting? So that's, again, a roundabout way of answering that question.
No, a great answer. What about jumping with weights? Is that something you support?
Yes, as long as the weight is under control. I've seen some athletes that are doing depth jumping, jumping up and jumping down, and they just can't control it. Can they do it without a weight? And then the progression again of that is what are you trying to achieve from that? So if you're trying to achieve power, and the rate of contraction, again, as I said, is less than 20%, so the person can't jump as high, or you're seeing them break down and your intent is them to be more explosive, get rid of the weight. Sometimes it's, sometimes we'll jump with a medicine ball. As soon as I see somebody's jump drop, if I wanted them to jump high, by jumping lower, they're not jumping higher. So why do they have the weight, right? The best jumper, most explosive athletes in the world, I had over a 40-inch vertical myself, and I know I have friends that have 45, 50-inch verticals, and they rarely jumped with weights. What they did was they were really athletic, and they were able to coordinate the movement in order to get up in the air, right? So that comes back again to a basis of athleticism. If you don't know how to get to a space and jump, it really doesn't matter if you can jump on the spot.
We had 2 more questions, and some came via text, some came over the chat room, Chris, and I know we got to wrap up a little bit. If anyone else does have a question, please ask. Have you faced any resistance to some of the new ideas? Not just with the pro guys, but with all your clients that you've dealt with. Have you faced any resistance?
Well, I think the resistance comes from that this is what everybody knows. So everybody thinks that you go into a strength coach, you go in, it's all I've heard about is my son needs to get stronger, needs to get stronger. So we get a kid that comes in, he's 6'2", 210 pounds. He's already bigger than everybody else, but he needs to get stronger, but he can't move in multiple directions back and forth. Just have him, and the parent says, what are you doing? Well, let's just have him run backwards. Let's have him move in all those directions. So I think it's what other people have laid down before us, but not realizing that athleticism is the basis of it. So you get the pushback from the coaches. You're all going to get pushback from coaches, from people saying, no, he needs to get stronger. He's not big enough. Well, is he not big enough? Battle strength. I have Jean-Gabriel Pajot, who's 180 pounds, can outbattle a 220-pound man based on postural positioning that I could put him into. And we work on postural positioning, not on him becoming a 200-pound, 5'10" athlete. So the pushback on the athleticism side, I think originally it was like that. But then when people really step back and understand that the best athletes are always the best athletes. And I say that in every setting. When we do our development camps, the best athletes are always the best athletes. They're the ones in our development camp that do these mini games. It's incredible to see those are the athletes that end up on our NHL team 3 or 4 years later. So please, try to get in the way, and you can be supported by that. There's so much more information now. There's so many other athletes that will support this. Go to a professional athlete and ask them. And they, when I showed them my presentation, and some of the athletes' presentation, they said, that's bang on, because that's the way we lived our lives when we were younger.
Excellent. And Oleg, thank you very much for that question too. I know you're very involved in the developmental end of the players there in Latvia. So we appreciate, 1, taking the time, and 2, caring enough to ask. more questions. I'll kind of wrap it up right now too, Chris. And again, thank you. But one of the things that we do as a development group, we like to communicate what we're seeing on the ice, not how they play on the power play, not if they score goals, but how they function on the ice. And then we talk to our fitness coaches, our strength coaches, and say, this is what we're seeing. If a player, bends too much at the waist, is it a lower body issue? Is it a back strength issue? Is it a quad issue? Like some kids don't extend all the way. Some kids don't move laterally real well. So we try and communicate hand in hand with the strength coach so they know that individual player in what we're seeing translating onto the ice.
Yeah,
do you like that?
I think that's incredibly important. When a coach asks me about, I never ask a coach I ask what they want, what they need of me. And you need to work backwards and say, this athlete, what do they do on the ice that we can help develop and work together and collaborate on? Because it's all about collaboration. As a strength coach, you should be collaborating with the skills coach, the skating coach, with the head coach. Maybe it's a resiliency thing that you're having an issue with. The coach says, look, we're trying to do this. The coach can't do everything, but maybe we can be a part of the resiliency thing. Maybe the athlete does need to get lower. Maybe they need to get on their outside edge. But if they can't get on the outside edge, if they're weak in their lateral structure of their body and it just keeps breaking. So can we strengthen that? And then you add this, and working together, it's so incredibly important. At the professional level, I think we do a pretty good job of it in communicating and making sure everybody understands what it is that's going to make that athlete better from a physical, mental component, and how do you collaborate and work together.
And I'll finish with this. What kind of feedback do you get from your players at all age levels? And do you take that into consideration, or do you do it because I know what's best and I'm telling you? Are you looking, as we talked about earlier, it's always athlete centered. Are you looking for feedback from the individual athlete?
100%. Everything that we do, everything, even coaches that I'm mentoring, if you're not listening to your coaches, and I would also say that I have athletes. I've had Sergei Gonchar shows up to me after playing 10 or 12 years, and Sergei comes to me as a strength coach. I'm not going to him and say, Sergei, you need to do this and you need to do this. He's played in the league for 12 years. I need to listen to the athlete, and the athlete says, I really think this works well for me before I warm up, before I get into games. I really feel like this keeps me injury free. I have to take that information in. Sometimes I'd say, that's great. Have you ever tried this? And that's what Sergei and I are good friends. We implemented that into his training, but I didn't take everything he had and just said, okay, that's no good. Here's my philosophy. Every athlete is different. They're different genetically. They've got different histories. They've worked with different strength coaches. They've worked with different skate coaches. It's like, sometimes I see in strength and conditioning, it's like the golf swing when somebody comes in and everybody's trying to change the golf swing based on what their theories are. You need to look at the athlete, listen to the athlete, and then work backward with your plan of action. The athlete always has, Vern Gambetta says something. He says that you work with the athlete. You don't tell the athlete what to do. Incredibly important.
Chris, that was rock star quality. We're happy we could get you up at 5 o'clock in the morning after a game last evening. We thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's really tough on the schedule that you guys have to keep, especially in COVID-19 hockey. But thank you so much. I know, and just so you guys know, Chris very much wants to be involved in things moving forward, and very much is available to others beyond his role with the Ottawa Senators. Like I say, he's the founder and president of FitQuest. He has a number of individuals working from. So hopefully down the road, he can be a resource for others. And again, we can get contact information. Please, in certain situations, they are in the middle of an NHL season. They've got a really young team that they're trying to grow up there, and they're doing a phenomenal job. So,
Toby, I just saw a quick message that somebody said, what about Tim Stutzel?
Oh, yeah.
Tim Stutzel, as a rookie, when the guys play kickball, kick around before games, he wins every game. He wins every game. So put that in perspective. That's athleticism. He has a lot of work to do on some things that we need to work on him with developmentally from a strength and stability point of view, but he's the best athlete. It's a great example. I wanted to take videos of it, but we can't in this modern world of masking and everything else that goes on. But he is the best athlete. He's one of the best athletes that walks into the dressing room. So
great question, Vladimir.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for having me, Toby. I really appreciate it.
No, and Matt, thank you very much for working with Chris to get him part of the group. Chris, we wish you and everybody in Ottawa nothing but a lot of success.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.